What's poppin', players? Part 2 of the Ballin' them C's. I'm Gold Ray, let's get to it. First on the list, Scottie Pippen. Now, I'm tired of hearing all the Scottie Pippen slander about what he was, what he wasn't. What he is a six-time champion. Only other one with Michael Jordan. So, whatever, however he got there, he did that. When he got his heart of a champion, him and Mike didn't look back. Nelly, next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Scottie Pippen, Nelly, Heart of a Champion. Next up on the list, Teresa Weatherspoon. When she slapped the court, she looked around like, who's bad? The baddest. Trina. Y'all know I ain't gonna say it. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Teresa Weatherspoon, Trina, the baddest B. Y'all know if I say it, Queen Latifah come out like, who you calling up? So, next up on the list, Derrick Rose, youngest MVP in the NBA. So he was a superstar way back when. Lupe Fiasco. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Derrick Rose, Lupe Fiasco, superstar. Next up on the list, Mark Jackson. And being a point guard, you always got to make sure all your other players are touching the ball. So you got to treat them right. Chubb Rock. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Mark Jackson, Chubb Rock, treat them right. 14 karat gold toothpick, I know, yeah. That's where Gold Ray. When you see the red gold, I'm probably spitting some facts. Next up on the list, Jamal Mashburn, Monster Mash. And if you had to guard him, I'm sure, so help me God, had to run through your mind. Fonte. Fonte from Little Brother, if you don't know, go know. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Monster Mash, Jamal Mashburn, Fonte, so help me God. Next up on the list, Moses Malone. And when he came to Philly, he was the missing piece they needed to go get a championship. He was the next movement. Black Thought. Exception. Yeah, Black Thought of the Roots. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Moses Malone, Black Thought, the next movement. Next up on the list, BD, Baron Davis, ahead of his time. Seemed like he always had the city on his back, the game. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Baron Davis, the game, the city. Next up on the list, Dirk Nowitzki. Down in Texas, Dirk was a smooth operator. Paul Wall. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Dirk Nowitzki, Paul Wall, smooth operator. Next up on the list, Jason Kidd. When he went in beast mode, he would get you a triple-double. His handles was ludicrous. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Jason Kidd, ludicrous, beast mode. Next up on the list, the Chief, Robert Parrish. He got him 3 championships up in Boston. Nobody beats the Biz Markie. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Robert Parrish, Biz Markie, nobody beats the Biz. Next up on the list, Sam I Am, or should they say 2-point geezer. Because anywhere inside the three, it was money. Rod Bass. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Sam Cassell, Rod Bass, It Takes Two. Next up on the list, Marshawn Lynch. Always ran the ball aggressive, Gucci. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Marshawn Lynch, Gucci, aggressive. They both play the game on their own rules, do their own thing, you feel me? Next up on the list, two of the bullies, or should I say, I ain't gonna say bullies, enforcers in their leagues. Charles Oakley, you don't want no drama. Fat Joe. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Charles Oakley, Fat Joe, no drama. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Alonzo Mourning, Rick Ross, Hustlin'. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Latrell Sprewell, Noriega, or Nori, Super Thug. Next up on the list, the Rain Man, Sean Kemp. Either if he was catching the lob from GP or coming down and dunking it down the lane, it was the most beautifulest thing in the world. Keith Murray. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Sean Kemp, Keith Murray, the most beautiful thing in the world. Next up on the list, Daryl Dawkins. He got so many nicknames, but he was always trying to turn the lights out when he broke the backboard. Freeway. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Daryl Dawkins, Freeway, Turn the Lights Out. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Terrell Owens, Jeezy, Standing Ovation. Next up on the list, Michael Vick. Michael Vick was kind of like a big deal. Pusha T. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Michael Vick, Pusha T, kind of like a big deal. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Kawhi Leonard, Freddie Gibbs, Too Legit. Next up on the list, Emmitt Smith. He was trying to come up and get that record. He kept coming and coming and coming. Pause, even though I don't play the pause game. Pimp C. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Emmitt Smith, Pimp C, coming up. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Rod Strickland, Mos Def, Hip Hop. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Tina Charles, Sugar T, The Players Change. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Monte Ellis, Razzcast, Street Superstar. Alright, let's slow it down here. Let's get to... Next up on the list, Jalen Rose. Being the point guard of the Fab Five, he used to have to bring the pain. It's always been a method to his madness. Method Man. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Jalen Rose, Method Man, Bring the Pain. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Chris Webber, Raekwon, Incarcerated Scarfaces. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Juwan Howard, Ghostface, the Iron Man. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Ray Jackson, Old Dirty Bastard, Hipper to the Hopper. The next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Jimmy King, Jizza, I Got Your Back. If you don't know, that was the Fab Five and Five of Wu-Tang. Of course, I couldn't put all 9 of y'all in there. I apologize to the rest of y'all. But next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Killer Crossover, Tim Hardaway. He may be the first one to have that crossover, if I'm not mistaken. If it was somebody before him, I definitely apologize. He hit you with it and be like, oh boy, with a killer Cameron. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Tim Hardaway, Cameron, Killer Cam. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Karl Malone, Big Pun, Beware. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Steve Francis, The Franchise, Zero, Mo City Don. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, J.R. Ryder, East Bay Funk, Eric Sermon, East Coast Funk, the song Music. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Mitch Richmond was a straight killer. Always kept it G, sticking to the G code. Spice One. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Mitch Richmond, Spice One, sticking to the G code. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Chauncey Billups. Always had to lead the troops as a point guard, General Patton, Big Boy. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Chauncey Billups, Big Boy, General Patton. And last on this part, Antoine Walker, Cyber Twan. He was like Superman in Boston. Soldier Boy, first one to take YouTube and use it how it should be used. Crank that. Next up on the list of the Ballin' MCs, Antoine Walker, Soldier Boy, Crank That. That concludes part 2 of the Ballin' MCs. Reason why I said in the beginning it's the dopest list that you gonna hear of, because all these songs are on playlists on Apple and Tidal. Now, each part you can go click on from the first song and listen to all these songs in order, and it can reminisce and take you back. And the ones that don't know about them, it can take you back and let you know about some of the iconic songs in hip hop. We love hip hop. That concludes part 2. See y'all on part 3. Peace.